Okay, everyone, welcome to tonight's meeting of the Port Phillip City Council. Best council in the whole wide world. The City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the Yalukit Willam clan of the Bunwurrung. We pay our respects to their elders, both past and present, and we acknowledge and uphold their continuing relationship with the land. And I remind everyone that the Council's meeting law requires that members of the gallery must not interject or take part in council debate, no matter how diminished it is. Any person who is called to order may be requested to leave the chamber. Gee, this is the first time I've read these instructions. They're very hardcore. Notwithstanding this, the Mayor may invite members of the gallery to speak for up to 3 minutes on a report listed in the agenda. There is also time allotted in tonight's agenda for public question time. If you wish to ask a question or speak to a report, please complete the blue form that's available, and 3 minutes is the absolute limit. Please note that all council meetings are now being live streamed, allowing the community watch. And if you want to film, you need, unfortunately, get the permission of the Mayor. In the unlikely event of an emergency evacuation, please follow the instructions of the Chief Warden, which is Kirsty. So, councillors, apologies. We do have some apologies. Could I ask someone to move them? Moved Councillor Simic, seconded Councillor Brown. These are apologies for Councillors Voss and Baxter. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Minutes of the previous meetings. Councillors, the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the Council held on 19 June have been circulated. Are there any questions? If not, can I have a motion to confirm these? Councillor Pearl and Councillor Bondi. And I'll put the motion. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thanks very much. Declarations of conflicts of interest. Does anyone have a conflict of interest? Great. There are none. Petitions and joint letters. Councillors, we have no petitions or joint letters tonight. Sealing schedule. Councillors, we have one document that actually requires sealing. This is the first time in a long time. This is a surrender of a lease, 63A Ormond, Esplanade, Elwood. Councillors, we've received no requests from the members of the public to address you. Do you have any questions? Do we have a mover? Moved Councillor Crawford, seconded Councillor Pearl. Do you wish to speak? I'd now like to put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Now, this is one of those times, it's a bit funny because we're being presented with an award, and you'll find one part of the council tonight is delivering an award to another part of the council. I think that would be me. I think this is very important to acknowledge our achievements. I think awards do matter. And awards do work, and so please indulge us, because tonight the CEO has requested, and I've given consent to, the presentation of 2 awards being added to tonight's agenda.
Thank you, and through you, Mr Mayor. Council recently won the Victorian Municipal Excellence Award, and this is awarded by the Association of Consulting Surveyors Victoria for excellence in dealing with planning applications for subdivision. And I'm now going to ask Ms Lily Rosick, General Manager of City Strategy and Sustainable Development, to say a few words and present the award to you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Ms Rosick.
It'll be my pleasure, Mr Smith. Through you, Mr Mayor. Every 2 years, the Association of Consulting Surveyors Victoria issues a number of awards that recognises the outstanding services provided by councils and its officers to the land surveying fraternity and their dealings with all matters pertaining to land subdivision. The body is an autonomous body dedicated to the development of surveying professionals, so it's a private body, And Port Phillip City Council this year was recognised for its sustained excellence in dealing with planning applications for subdivision and was awarded, as Mr Smith said, the Victoria Municipal Excellence Award, Best Council in Victoria, based on a survey of their members who are licensed surveyors. Council receives over 1,500 planning applications per year and around 200 applications specifically relate to subdivisions and or consolidation on land. The award reflects the high quality service provision by one of our officers, Sandra Stewart, Council Subdivision Officer, and the statutory planning and planning business support teams of City Development. And the Council was also recognised in 2017 by the Association of Consulting Surveyors Victoria as being the best urban council in dealing with subdivision applications. So this is our second award.
Mr Mayor, we might talk about the second award and then get you to stand up and receive both, if that's okay with you. Our second award, Council recently won a Gold Australasian Reporting Award for its annual report. And I now ask Ms Kylie Bennett, Director Officer of the CEO, to say a few words and present the award to the Mayor. Thank you, Ms Bennett.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'm very pleased to report that at the Australasian Reporting Awards ceremony that was held on Wednesday the 19th of June, Council was presented with a Gold Award. The Australasian Reporting Awards are open to all organisations in Australia and New Zealand and countries throughout the Asia Pacific who prepare an annual report. Organisations that enter those awards are able to benchmark their reports against the world's best practice and their peers and receive recognition for excellence in reporting with a gold, silver or bronze award able to be received. I'm pleased to say this is the second time in a row the Council has won a gold award and is certainly a very outstanding achievement for all those involved. And I'd like to recognise Sally Horner and Stephen Ross who prepare those reports for Council and the community.
Fantastic. Yep, I'm coming around. Well, that's very exciting, and mazel tov and congratulations to everyone. So, we're now resuming standing orders, and we go on to agenda item 6, which is public question time. We have no questions from the public. Councillor question time. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Bond.
Yeah, two questions. I read in the paper last Friday night that the City of Port Phillip, or last Friday morning, to the City of Port Phillip is owed money resulting from a function held at the St Kilda Town Hall for Mr Michael Danby. My questions are, how much is the City of Port Phillip owed by Mr Danby, and what is the City of Port Phillip doing to recover that debt?
Yeah. Ms McNeil.
Through you, Mayor, the outstanding invoice for hire of the council facility for the event that was on the 7th of April was $3,077. To date, we haven't received payment, and in line with our facility hire terms and conditions, we've withheld the bond, which is $1,049. At this point in time, the council has yet to receive the balance of $2,028. What steps we're taking? We have contacted the organisers of the event to recoup the payment on 4 different occasions. and we will be following the normal debt recovery process as per our council's debtor management policy. So that outlines all the steps that need to be taken, and that's just a routine process.
The article Councillor Bond referred to said that council had written that, or potentially written that debt off. Had council made a decision to write that debt off and not pursue it any further?
Through you, Mayor, no decision has been made to write off the debt. The debt policy does refer to the requirement to look at a certain point in time, whether the cost of pursuit is more than the cost of the amount that you're recovering, but we haven't reached that point yet, so we are still pursuing this.
Okay, no further questions? Thanks very much, councillors. I'll now move to the presentation of reports. 8.1, presentation of the CEO report. And we've got 3 questions. Robbie Niagui. I don't think you're on.
Robbie Niagui, St Kilda. I'm sort of speaking tonight in relation to 2 items. First one is the Peanut Farm Reserve Sports Pavilion upgrade. I guess it's kind of from a place of slight confusion, if not possible frustration from a public perspective. My understanding was it was kind of advertised to be completed in April, something I often walk past in the morning when I go on my run. I'll often use the gym equipment next to it. So just a general interest, I was kind of interested to know when it would finish. There'd been a sign up in front of the area that was saying that it would be completed in April, which before the end of April was taken down. I understand that the buildings are now complete and there's obviously more landscaping work to be done. Kind of going back and looking through the CEO report, up until March, the completion date is listed as April. And in March, although it says April, it then mentions in the body text that actually landscaping won't be completed until June. And then all the subsequent CEO reports refer to June as the completion date, including this one for July, which says it should be completed by the end of June. Obviously, it's July now and it's still not completed. So I guess I'm not sure if it's a communication breakdown or whether council actually honestly do think it's on track. But from a perspective of a community member, I walk past, it's certainly not finished yet. And I think it's important, if it is off track, that council be a bit clearer about that. Second item is in relation to In Our Backyard. Rhonda and Brenda are going to ask some more specific questions in terms of the action plan, but I guess there's a broad perspective. We're now into the 5th financial year where no money has actually been expended. 500,000 is being put aside each year, and it's pretty frustrating when we talk about the importance of social housing to see In Our Backyard listed as on track when, from anyone watching this space today, it is quite clearly not on track. It is very much not on track. And I guess we're keen to know when that money is going to get spent and invested in social housing, which is important. I think, again, this is around the way that the wording is being used in the CEO report. It talks about June 2021 as the deadline. Now, the action plan, which is what we're really talking about at the moment, is August. So really that should be the deadline, and we should be talking about whether we are or are not meeting the milestones within that action plan. And Rhonda and Brenda will ask some specific questions in relation to that. Thank you.
Thanks. The first one is Peanut Farm Reserve.
Through you, Mayor. I acknowledge that the pavilion was finished on time and that the signage was changed. The decision was made when we finished that work that the impact of the construction on the reserve was quite significant once the demountables and all the fencing was taken down, and we took the opportunity to add landscaping to the scope of works. That landscaping is largely done. We also had always planned a new lighting upgrade to the Oval. That was communicated through community consultation, but perhaps may not have been on the signage, and that lighting will be done in August. There is also a new gate, which was a new need identified because of unauthorised access by vehicles into the reserve. That work is being done now and will be completed next week. And with the cricket net relocation, that was an opportunity that we took once the pavilion was finished to make a better outcome for the park. And there were some delays in getting the building permit to build the tennis hit-up wall as part of the cricket nets. That's now been received and we'll be starting that work in August. So there's not long to go, and I appreciate the concerns of the community.
Thanks very much, Ms Davis. Mr Keenan?
Through you, Mayor. In relation to in our backyard, you're correct in that there haven't been any housing delivered at the moment, which is in relation to the availability of government funds to supplement council's investment. Council's strategy is to leverage the land and the funding that's been made available with government funds and or borrowings from social housing providers. The alternate would be for government to invest a fairly small amount of that and produce a very small number of houses. So in terms of delivering houses on the ground, there are a number of applications under the current social housing funding round at the government, with a number of providers have applications in the city of Port Phillip, and we're awaiting the outcome of that. Latest I've heard is it's likely September that those outcomes will be notified. That way we will know whether any of the housing providers in the city have been successful with that round. In terms of the other actions, they are actions in getting ready to implement the plan, and they're pretty much on track. Council had a workshop a couple of weeks ago looking at the overall governance and other structures for in our backyard, and that will be taken to the Community Housing Forum in the next month, and Council will then make a final consideration around those matters, probably around August.
Thanks very much, Mr Keenan. Rhonda Small?
Rhonda Small, St Kilda. Thanks, Mr Keenan, for some of the information you've just provided. Some of my questions are probably in part answered by that, but I was a little mystified to see that the In Our Backyard housing strategy was marked as on track in the CEO's report. First, because I was a nominated and accepted member of the Housing Forum, which was originally scheduled to meet in April, and that meeting was postponed, and that forum has not yet met. So that means that some of the milestones in the action plan, it seems to me, have been missed. The Housing Forum hasn't been involved in what the report here says has been completed, that is the Housing Needs Framework, and the other statement here that the program delivery guidelines are 90% completed. Again, since the Housing Forum hasn't met, it's had no input into this work that appears to be ongoing but not completed, even though that was meant to have happened by May. The preferred option for governance arrangements was to have been developed between April and June, and it's good to hear that councillors have had some discussions about that. It was scheduled to be implemented from the 1st of July, and as it's now the 3rd of July, that clearly also is not on track. I guess I'm wondering what's happened to all these milestones.
Through you, Mr Mayor, and I think I would agree that on the original action plan we have to agree with Ms Small that some of the actions in the early part of the action plan weren't completed on time in terms of the Housing Forum being in April. That's because we had to do a comprehensive review of a few pieces of work. We actually had a a consultant in that started that work to do some work on governance, and we had to redo that piece of work, which delayed us. Mr. Kennan's correct. We had an extensive 2-hour workshop with Council about 2 or 3 weeks ago where we went through governance options, a summary of the project pipeline, the needs analysis, and a broad set of contents for the program management delivery guidelines. That workshop was set up so that we could hold a community housing forum with some initial council input. That housing forum will now be scheduled, as Mr. Keenan mentioned, in the next couple of weeks, with a view to getting the forum's views on that material prior to taking it back to council in the end of August, September. So there have been some delays, but it was important for us, given those first tasks in the action plan were set up pieces of work, to run those through council in a proper way and get them to a state where we could have some real input from the housing forum before coming back to council with further advice. And that will happen in the next month. So I think you're right, we have missed some of those milestones in the front end of that action plan. But the work I've seen is, I think, will put us in good stead to accelerate in the latter part of that action plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Rhonda. Brenda Forbath.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brenda Forbath, Elwood. I too have a specific question about the report on In Our Backyard and where it's how it's progressing, and I ask you to have a look at Action 7, dated June 2019 in the Council's action plan, and it states in June this year that Council would resolve how previous funding provided to the Port Phillip Housing Trust can be leveraged to contribute to In Our Backyard outcomes into the future. Now, I'm presuming this means that Council officers have had meetings with the Port Phillip Housing Trust to discuss how that leverage might occur. And my question tonight is, have you had those meetings and what was the outcome of them? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the leveraging of funding previously provided to the Port Phillip Housing Trust, if I've got this right, I think is In Our Backyard Lever 5, and that goes to some of the governance arrangements that we briefed Council on 2 or 3 weeks ago, and as I said in answer to Ms Small's question, we are still working through how that lever is best operated, given there's a range of governance options that we put to Council. So we haven't had conversations with the Housing Trust first, with the Housing Trust on that. We have an ongoing conversation when they come to us with their proposals, and but not a specific question in terms of resolving that, because it goes to the governance options that we talked to Council about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we will consult with the Housing Forum on those options in the next 3 or 4 weeks. So you're correct, it said by June we would do that. That is not on track, but we will bring that back on in the next 2 months through that process that I've been talking about, because the leveraging of that, the pulling of that policy lever goes to the governance options that we presented to Council a couple of weeks ago.
Thanks very much, Brenda. Okay, councillors, that's all the questions on the CEO's report. Do you have any questions? Do we have a resolution? Moved Councillor Pearl, seconded Councillor Copsey. Councillor Pearl, you don't wish to speak. Councillor Copsey? Anyone else wish to speak? I'll move to putting it. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thanks very much. Sorry. 9.1, Neighbourhood Programs Committee Report 2018-19. So we have no speakers on that. Councillors, do you have any questions?
Just a quick one. What's the total budget for the grants program and how much of the budget did we allocate?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the budget for 1920 is $36,000 and it's generally fully allocated during the year. I think that's correct. So I think it's 36 if I've got that right. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Seconded by Councillor Copsey. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Pell?
Some good grants in here. There's one in particular, which I had a little bit to do with, which was the student from Jody from Albert Park College. They didn't meet the criteria at all, but they had an awesome application and they sought pity, and we gave them $250 for them to do some good community work. There's some good applications here, and it's a good program to support local community groups, fill the odds and ends to make some of these events a success. So most of them, I think, add a lot of value for the small amount of money they provide. And there's not much bureaucracy involved in getting these through. So thanks to the people on the committee, and I encourage more people to apply to these for $1,000 or $2,000 grants.
Thanks very much. Do you wish to speak? Councillor Copsey, you're a member of the
I am, yes.
committee.
I have the pleasure of sitting on this committee currently for council with yourself, Mayor Gross, and just echoing what Councillor Pell just said, they're fantastic projects that come through, a real window into the amazing community building activities that come generated out of our fantastic community here in Port Phillip. And if you have a look through the neighbourhood program grants, you'll see a veritable who's who of the amazing and strong and active community groups that we have working to improve connection and inclusion in our community, celebrate the achievements of individuals and diversity in our community, and also to take care of the beautiful place that we live. Beach Patrol's in there, some other great recipients as well. So thank you to everybody who has applied, and I hope that the grants have gone some way to helping your projects become reality, and we encourage further submissions now that we're into a new funding round.
Great. Any further speakers? Move to the vote now. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Okay. 9.2. Fitzroy and Little Grey Street CCTV Final Evaluation Report. Councillors, we've got several speakers here, some quite eminent. We welcome them to our chamber. Inspector Ron Kleinblatt. Welcome, Inspector. Good to see you.
Mayor, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. As the local area commander in Port Phillip at the moment, I've been asked to come and say a few words about the cameras. So over the past 2 years, we've seen a 58% drop in crime, which is quite significant because often you see small spikes of crime dropping over a short period, but this has been sustained over 2 years. Whilst we can't solely attribute it to the cameras, they do greatly help. We are really keen and happy that we've had a magnificent partnership with both the Council, the DHHS, St Kilda Housing, Port Phillip Housing and the State Government, who obviously funded the CCTV. That wasn't the only activity that dropped crime. Obviously there are other activities in the area that helped. The closure of the Gatwick, the boarding house at Little Grey Street, and both agent-operated venues. The State Government's influence to close them due to their concerns. SEPTED improvements with graffiti and lighting, community forums that we held, and safety audits, the alcohol bans that have been introduced over the last summer, introduced along the beach, and the glass ban. All these things made the contribution. It wasn't just one part of the puzzle. Victoria Police are only a small piece of that puzzle, and it's a whole group effort that makes these changes. Some of the concerns about the cameras, obviously we've got the Department of Justice coming out to St Kilda over the next month and the rest of the year to come out and review our processes, and we'll work with them to make sure that we're being governed properly and they're being utilised as best they can. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much for coming and sharing that with us. Senior Sergeant Jane McDonald? She's not here tonight. Liz Kyle? She's a non... But I know someone who is here, Mr David Blakely.
Mr Mayor, fellow councillors, you must be getting sick of me at the moment.
Never.
Oh, thank you. I'm here in supporting the continuation and the funding of the CTD in both in Fitzroy Street and Grey Street. Placemaking last week, we had our last committee. The number one concern to everyone on our committee, which is a diverse committee, was safety and crime in the area. I think it was over 70%, 78% or 72%. CTD alone won't solve our crime problems, but I think it has proven over the last couple of years or year to make some difference on the street as part of a jigsaw of solutions, including the I noticed some people are still not feeling safe on the street. I think that could be also the built environment and also the fact it's so empty at the moment, which doesn't help things. I'm also, some of my friends in the area who live around St Kilda Hill, Grey Street, are unable to get here tonight, and they have all noticed the increase in feeling of safety on Grey Street, which I do too. I walk there often to work and back, and I think that's a great thing. I think it's a small investment for such a major concern for local residents. And I would like to fill up with a couple of anecdotes. I was on the corner of Grey Street and Fitzroy Street, and there's some drug dealers and some people shooting up. This is a few months ago. I called the St Kilda Police. The person answered the phone and said, "I'll check on the CCTV. There was a police car in 2 minutes." For another day, I was down on the same corner, and there was a fight breaking out, and one of the guys said, "Oh, it's on camera." Then they stopped fighting. So these things are real. Is a genuine concern, the safety of the street, and I just think CCTV is a help, not a hindrance, and it's something we should fully support. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillors, that's all the contributions from the community. Do we have any questions? Move to motions. Oh,
just a quick question about whether there's any intention from council to for ongoing reporting and maintenance. Sorry, I'm lost for words. If there's an intention to continue monitoring the impact of CCTV cameras in the area. And just to be clear, I mean beyond this 2-year period.
Through you, Mayor. This was the evaluation that was promised, as we know, from Fitzroy Street, and then we encompassed Little Grey Street. The next set of cameras will be going in along the foreshore and Ackland Street, and we will be working with our service level agreements with police and justice to look at the efficacy of those as a whole. You'll note in the report that the recommendation is to bring a CCTV policy back to council, which should encompass issues around future maintenance.
Through you, Mr Mayor, and future monitoring and reporting.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Any further questions? Resolutions, motions? Councillor Bond? Councillor Pearl? Councillor Bond?
Thank you. I think that, as mentioned by the inspector here tonight, the highlight figure in there is a 58% recorded drop in crime over the 2-year period of the since the cameras were installed and operational on Fitzroy Street. Yes, part of that will be because of the CCTV cameras. Part of that will be the closure of the Gatwick and closure of the Regal and other activity that's happened down there. So it's not one thing; it's a suite of things. Every action we take down there plays a small part. Overall, great to see 58% drop in crime on the street, and we just need a little more attention down there. There's still a few problems. It's not the final outcome we still need to get to. We still need a lot of work to do, and then the traders can start and thrive, and we get some of those closed businesses, some of those empty shops open. And we're doing our part as a council with extra cleaning, with extra local laws, with our graffiti removal program, the engagement of Renew Australia. So and other activities that council are doing. So over time we've just got to keep chipping away at this. It does get quite depressing sometimes when you see shops closed, but then we've got some brand new ones opening up shortly down there. So looking forward to that. And as we come out of winter into summer. Hope David and the rest of his traders down there get through the winter and get back and enjoy summer, and we can just keep plugging away at this and making a difference. So, well done to all the officers on compiling this report. A lot of work's gone into it, and I think outcome speaks for itself.
Councillor Pearl?
The evidence is pretty clear in this report, and from an evidence base moving forward, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But a ginormous reduction in crime in these areas, and anecdotally, having been at the National Theatre in the past couple of days and the shops around there, you can see the difference that one single camera in that area has made. Also, obviously, some of the crime moves to adjacent areas. That's a logical fact. But overall, crime is heading in the right direction in those hotspots that have been identified, and it's doing exactly what it is meant to do. I was fortunate enough to see Jason Kelly, who's a Port Phillip resident, the former district inspector, or I'm not sure exactly what the title is, and a huge amount of blood, sweat and tears went into work from officers and councillors in the last council and this council, and particularly Jason was a huge advocate for this technology and this investment, both from this council and the state government, and I think he should be acknowledged for the hard work and information he provided us both in council meetings and also behind the scenes. So well done to this council. We should be proud of what we've done and hold our head up high.
Thanks very much. Any further questions? Speeches? Oh, Councillor Brand. Thank you.
I'm pleased enough to see the 58% reduction in crime. I'm not really sure what it represents. There needs to be a lot more interpretation or depth of interpretation before I'm really sure that it's connected with the cameras. I'm not unhappy with the cameras. I'm actually a bit of a convert in a way. I've come around to sort of seeing more advantages, but I see them more in the anecdotal evidence from the police about how it actually helps their policing, and I think there are benefits to be had in that direction. But apart from that one figure, I would have thought that if there were more cameras around, they would be actually catching more crime rather than less. So I just don't understand exactly what that figure means. The rest of the figures are absolutely in some sort of plateau, which also surprises me because I think that the whole thing would be moving one way or the other naturally anyway, up or down, not just flat. So I'm actually a bit disappointed with the results because I don't really see any particular trend emerging from it. But the perceptions of safety anecdotally is up. The actual evidence of change in the street is not there. but I do think that the anecdotal evidence from the police is something which I'm interested in hearing, and I think also it probably keeps the interaction of the police. I think it's a really good thing for the police to be filmed as well when things are happening, and so it's sort of a record. It's a record which is sort of more transparent and more. There's surveillance on everything that's going on in difficult areas. I think that's not a bad thing. Anyway, I'm very thank the officers for doing the survey. I wish it was more conclusive, and I look forward to another round of it.
Thanks very much. Any further contribution? Do you wish to close? Move to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thanks very much. 13.1, updates to the Port Phillip City Collection Policy. There are no speakers from the community. Councillors, do you have any questions? Do I have a mover? Moved Councillor Copsey, seconded Councillor Crawford. Do you wish to speak? And we'll move. Anyone else wish to speak? We'll move to the vote. All those in favour? That's once again unanimous. Agenda item 14.1, proposed tenancy agreements, Gasworks Arts Park. Tamara Jungworth, Madam CEO, welcome. No. Now you're on.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name's Tamara Jungworth. I'm the Director of Gasworks Arts Park and a resident of St Kilda. I'm speaking to commend the work of council officers on preparing the leases until June 30 next year for Gasworks Arts Park. They have made the process very smooth and straightforward, and have provided information as required in a very clear and straightforward fashion. So thank you very much to the officers in the property team for that. And also thank you very much for the arts and events teams in council for their collaboration in key initiatives that will improve the visitor experience at Gasworks Arts Park. We are a successful incubator of new art for our community to enjoy. For example, this year we produced the world premiere of Become the One, a new Australian play about an Australian rules footballer confronting the decision whether or not to publicly acknowledge his same-sex partner. This play sold out many houses, and it emerged almost 2 years ago after winning a playwriting competition at Gasworks. Another project we're very proud of this year is presenting a solo exhibition by Georgie Seckle, an exhibition of metal sculpture inspired by nature. Georgie first came to our attention 4 years ago when she won the People's Choice Award for the From Nature Outdoor Sculpture exhibition. This year at Gasworks, we were able to support Georgie to have a solo exhibition and to sell $15,000 worth of artwork. This was a wonderful achievement for this Gasworks protege. These two examples illustrate the long incubation times for art and for artists. So, councillors, we do look forward to discussing a longer lease with you over the next few months. Art takes time to percolate, and artistic careers take time to develop. The long-term dreams we have for future park development will also take time to realise. There's much to do, and we can't wait to get on and start doing it. We're working together, for example, to replace our theatre seating, and very excitingly, we've started to explore ways to work together to promote what's happening, because what happens at Gasworks contributes to the critical mass of what's happening in the city of Port Phillip. We're producing over 30 exhibitions and 200 shows every year, so there's something on offer for locals and day visitors all year round. With new collaborations with council, we can effectively profile the precinct and the municipality. This will benefit artists, visitors, local traders, and the Council's strategic vision as a cultural destination where art can be enjoyed in everyday life. Thank you, and I commend the motion.
Thanks, Tamara. I really appreciate that. Councillors, over to you. You have any questions? Sorry, what was that? Happy to. Councillor Louise Crawford is happy to move. Councillor Copsey seconding. Councillor Crawford.
I'm just going to add to the long list of great things that Gasworks is doing, and I'm going to recommend the show that's coming there this Thursday and Friday night, Spencer. It's definitely worth getting down and having a look. It's just a great example of more of the great work that Gasworks do, and it's an Australian production. It's very worth it. It's also about a footballer, funnily enough.
Pity you weren't as enthusiastic in recommending the last production that was at Gasworks.
Sorry, Mayor.
Councillor Copsey. Okay, any further speakers? We'll move to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thanks very much. 14.2, submission to local government bill, a reform proposal. Councillors, we have no contributors from the community on this. Do you have any questions? Councillor Bond.
In our submission, it's under electoral structures. Our position states, Council confirms its position outlined in the March 2018 submission to the Draft Local Government Act Bill, that it is of the view that if Council's ward structure should remain reflective of its community and maintain flexibility to achieve this rather than be restricted by legislative provisions. Is this committing us to support single-member wards or multi-member wards, or does that say it's not clear one way or the other that that's what we support? We'd like to be able to decide that as a council.
Through you, Mr Mayor, it's not suggesting that you support one option over another. It's merely stating that there should be the flexibility rather than it being mandated by legislation.
Councillor Crawford.
Can I clarify then, having just transferred from the VEC when we went to multi-member wards, is that not an independent body recommending that, or do we as a council actually have the choice to vote otherwise? I guess I was thought that it was an independent decision.
Through you, Mr Mayor, so yes, it is an independent decision undertaken by the VEC and obviously signed off on by the Minister. But what we're suggesting is that, or what the Council resolved in 2018 was that rather than mandating one option over another, there should be some flexibility at the time the electoral representation review is undertaken to consider what might be the best ward structure at that time, rather than locking it into a particular option through legislation.
And if there are no further questions, councillors, we have a resolution. Is there anyone? Councillor Simic?
Mayor, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Brand. Councillor Simic?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the officers for turning this around so quickly. It is true to say that the reform proposal from the state government caught a lot of people by some surprise. There was changes to the Local Government Act which had been consulted on with the community and councils and many other stakeholders for some years, which led into the last state election. Since the state election, we've seen this reform proposal document and a very short consultation period time set. The reform proposal is a significant moves away significantly from what's been proposed previously. There are a lot of points within the reform proposal which are not very clear. They don't provide enough information for us to be able to determine whether we support them or not. Some of the donation reform and some of the training requirements which are proposed under the reform proposal are just not clear. We just can't work out what exactly the impact will be on councillors and councils. And we have asked for more information from the government. Some of the mandated changes to ward structure and also to the electoral structure and the training are a significant change, and I very truly believe that they need a lot more time and a lot more consultation with the community, where the state government is actually listening to the feedback, effectively proposing changes to the legislation before it adopts it in Parliament. So I'm a little bit concerned, and I know that many in the local government sector are concerned that this has happened as quickly as it has, and that it will have a significant impact on the sector without enough consultation. So I commend the officer's proposal. I commend the officers for turning this around quickly, for taking the time to consult with councillors, and for putting this to the state government. I really do hope that the state government pays attention to our submission. And I am sure that our submission will probably be quite reflective of how many other stakeholders are feeling as well. So I hope that the legislation that we see come to Parliament doesn't continue or doesn't end up as a proposal which doesn't adequately reflect what the community and what stakeholders want. I really hope that we can move to a better position and a more clearer position from the state government before changes to the Local Government Act are adopted at a state level. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Brand?
Yes, I'm agree with what Councillor Simic has just said. The process is a strange one. It has been sort of dumped on us very precipitously, I think. There was a long consultation period over a lot of changes in the Act, and then suddenly, right at the end of that process, a whole lot more quite radical suggestions were put in, and nothing particularly wrong with that, except that a lot of our responses are we need more information before we can possibly make a decision on those sorts of things. The subtleties in these and the consequences, and sometimes the unintended consequences in these reforms are deep and varied, and it's just not easy just to sort of go with a gut reaction and say, oh, we like this or we don't like that. A typical example is the multi-member ward or the single-member ward proposal. This city, to put in a little bit of context, until the previous election, we were 7 single-member wards, and we were told that we had to change to 3 multi-member wards, and a lot of people felt quite resistant to that. Maybe just been resistant to being told. I was sceptical about it, but now having experienced a multi-member ward with 3 councillors in each ward, I think there are lots and lots of good reasons why it actually provides the city with better governance and certainly better service from councillors. I think we've worked together very well as a team in my ward, for instance, even though we're from different directions. And I think it's actually been quite a success. There are pros and cons. But I feel it's really quite weird now that we're being told we may be just forced to go back to the opposite again. It's just a strange process. I think people need to understand that it's an unusual situation to be in. Anyway, many of us on this council are very happy with the way it is. I know that there are arguments for and against, but I think our submission at least addresses some of them.
Thanks very much, Councillor Brand. Any further speakers? Councillor Pearl?
Gosh, how glum. I think we should be happy that we're actually seeing some action from the state government. They just got re-elected, they have a mandate to do some reform, and I'm just happy they're actually moving on with this area, and we should be happy that they're actually making some decisions. They don't hold themselves to the same level of consultation threshold that we do, and that's a reality of the situation. But we vote governments in at the state and the federal election to get on and do the job that they're elected to do and reform. They have to listen, that's true, but their threshold of consultation is always different from ours. On the topical issue behind the scenes has always been the electoral structure, councillors, and I would keep an open mind to this. I think this city, the evidence seems to be, anecdotally from me anyway, that this city was probably better served under single-member constituencies than the multi-member constituencies. And I think the electoral results in the past will prove that, but we'll see what history says. So I'm happy to see a local government minister actually doing something and getting on with the job, because I saw nothing but, heard nothing but snoring coming out of the local government office in the past year or so, and it's good to actually see they're actually moving forward with it. And the minister obviously has a mandate to get kicking with reform, and I'm glad to actually see they produce something. The industry doesn't like it, and they're always fall back and say there's not enough consultation, not enough time to think about it, but I'm just happy they're actually getting on with it. And I think ultimately this city is better serviced under a single-member constituency for a number of reasons, which I think Councillor Bond's about to go through.
Thanks very much, Councillor Pearl. Councillor Bond?
Yes, I would like to speak to this. Look, I've been elected under both systems, and both systems have their pros and cons. The only argument I've heard, really in favour of the multi-member ward system is, it gives us diversity, gives us a variety of councillors, but that's not always a good thing. Single-member wards will ensure that we have councillors who focus solely on their local community. They will have to look after their local ward. They will have to focus on local issues. And councillors that don't do that, councillors who have no interest in their local ward, who don't turn up or ignore their constituents, quite frankly, passengers on the council, just won't get re-elected under a local ward system. So, I can see, if we put our own personal interests aside, I will fully accept it's probably easier for me to get elected under a multi-member ward than a single-member ward, but putting that aside, what's best for the city, and it's what we should be concentrating on here, what would be best for the city of Port Phillip would definitely be single-member wards where councillors are solely focused on the local area. That's what we should be sitting in this chamber doing at all times, is deciding what's best for, not ourselves personally as councillors, what will be best for us to get elected, but what will be best for the city. And I've come to the conclusion that single-member wards represent that. So, we're not specific on this, but if we move across to a single-member ward in a couple of years' time, I'd have no issues with that, and feel quite confident that any of us here, if we're good councillors, if we concentrate on our local wards, turn up and meet with our constituents, reply to emails and things like that, none of us should have any issues or any reason to fear a single-member ward structure in the city of Port Phillip. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bond. Councillor Crawford.
Just a few quick things. I do think the reason that the local government bill didn't get passed last year before the election was because there was such a packed agenda of bills and they just couldn't fit them all in before the election. Lucky they get another term to do so. I'm going to comment on the multi-member ward. I do think we need flexibility, because one of the things that never gets discussed at a council level is that it's not a full-time job. A lot of people have the idea that it is a full-time job, and as much as a lot of us councillors would like that to be the case, it doesn't provide you with anywhere near the means to do so. So I want to put on the public record that I think the multi-member ward allows you flexibility when your councillors are essentially part-time, even though we're putting in probably more like full-time hours where we can. It's not always easy to reply to emails as timely as you would, or to attend all the events because you're busy trying to earn money to be able to afford to be on council for many of us. I would like to say that it would be nice to be paid above the minimum wage when you divide our allowance. So I'm going to put that on the record, that it would be nice to be able to put more of my focused energy into representing my ward, but there's an economic reality for a lot of councillors. In that way, the multi-member ward means that we're more responsive to our community, so we tend to work together, and when someone's got busy stuff going on in their life, whether it be personal or work-related, then someone else can pick up the momentum. So it encourages us to work more collectively and work collectively to get outcomes for our wider wards and the wider municipality, rather than just trying to get outcomes for that little pocket. So I do think that our proposal is for flexibility in this space is a good one, because single member just turning up to an event doesn't mean you achieve or are necessarily effective as a councillor. So it's a balance on how you judge whether someone's been a good councillor. That's my 2 cents worth.
Councillor Simish, do you wish to close?
I didn't think that this was going to become simply a discussion on whether we support single-member or multi-member wards. I think the officers strike a right balance in their approach. I think that any councillor, if they're not performing their job or responding to the community effectively in a multi-member ward system or a single-member ward system, will get voted out. That's the reality of a democratic process. And that's the reality of what happens. I think it's important to put on the record that personally I support a multi-member ward system, because this is what we've been moving towards in Victoria across many of the municipalities. It's what independent reviews by the Victorian Electoral Commission have suggested for so many council areas, because multi-member wards are actually more representative of our community. The Victorian Electoral Commission has put very clearly that they are a better way of representing a growing community. In the City of Port Phillip, we're increasing at 7 new people a day. And so there's a lot of people to respond to, and a huge community for us to make sure that we're catering for. I think it's also important to put on the record, and I know many councillors share this view, that it has been really good actually working with a team of people within each of the wards who might have different points of views, but I think that collectively we come in so many instances, come to a collegial and agreed position, and that we work together to represent our community effectively. I think it's also important to point out in all of this that any councillor is elected to represent the whole community. So we're all here representing the City of Port Phillip. There's so many issues that we deal with, and you just look at today's council agenda, hardly any of the actual topics are reflective of issues happening in my ward. They're issues reflective of and affecting everyone within our municipality. So it is important for us to work together. It is important for us to listen to independent advice and to make sure that democratic principles are applied in the way that councillors elected, in the way they represent their community. So I think a lot more work needs to be done, a lot more consultation needs to take place before the state government's ready to implement changes. I don't agree that the state government can get away with a lower threshold consultation than we hold ourselves to. We should always be aiming and working towards the highest level of consultation, so that everyone in our community is represented, and that in the end our democracy serves its people. So I'll leave it at that, because I think officers have struck the right balance in making sure that all of our varied views are taken into consideration in the submission that will go to the state government. I look forward to seeing how this issue progresses and look forward to staying involved in the debate.
Great, thanks very much. Now move to the vote. All those in favour? Once again, unanimous. There's so much love in the room. 15, notice of motion. Councillors, we have no notices of motion tonight. 16, reports by councillors. Councillors, do we have any oral reports from council delegates? Tim's not here. 17, urgent business. Councillors, we have one item of urgent business being in addition to the City of Port Phillip submission to the Royal Commission into Victoria's mental health system, which was lodged last month. To consider an item of urgent business, I need a mover and seconder for Council to accept an item of urgent business. Thank you, Councillors Copsey and Simic. Move Councillor Copsey, second Councillor Simic. Now put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. 17.1. Addition to the City of Port Phillip submission into the Royal Commission into Victoria's mental health system. Are there any questions of officers in relation to this item? Councillors, may I have a councillor to move a motion? Thank you, Councillor Copsey, and thank you, Councillor Simic. Councillor Copsey and Simic, do you wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Copsey.
Thank you. Yes, thanks, councillors, for considering this tonight. We have already made a submission to the Royal Commission into Victoria's mental health system. And I thank the officers for progressing this addendum, which I think is a really excellent opportunity to highlight a number of groups, I think, particularly those working in the homelessness space, who see the interaction between people with various vulnerabilities and risks of homelessness, and the way that complex needs can exacerbate the risk of homelessness but also lead to further homelessness, have been working really hard to make sure that the Royal Commission into the mental health system actually considers these issues that are interrelated. And as we see very frequently in Port Phillip, it's very hard to solve one without the other. The submission that Council has already made to the Royal Commission did highlight homelessness and the interaction between mental health issues and homelessness, but this addendum makes really clear the need for wraparound support models and essentially what we know is best practice, housing first models of getting people into secure and stable accommodation and then providing all of the wraparound services that someone might need in order to get their life a bit more back on track. It's a really good, succinct summary of the evidence. I thank Mr Keenan for his hard work in progressing this quickly, because I know that the deadline is approaching very soon, if not past, for closing of submissions tomorrow. So yeah, that's why it's urgent. Thank you. I think it really adds a bit of depth and talks about some of the not only the problems that we have in the City of Port Phillip in helping house and take care of our community, but also the real opportunities that we have. We've got a council and we've got a community, as we heard tonight, that is absolutely gung-ho about finding solutions to this problem. And so I really hope that we'll see some excellent outcomes from the Royal Commission. We know that the government has already undertaken to implement all of the recommendations of this Royal Commission. And so I'm really pleased to see that we're highlighting a possible solution that I hope we'll see some traction on in the very near future. And I commend this motion to councillors.
Thank you. Councillor Simic.
Thank you, Councillor Copsey, and I agree with the comments you've made. It's fantastic that this additional information is being supplied, really making sure that we address issues of mental health and homelessness. It's well documented that the early investment in those areas actually prevents problems later down the track, problems like crime, which we're all working to avert. I think it's important to outline that across Victoria there has been a huge underinvestment in both mental health and homelessness support over the years. In fact, Victoria continues to have the lowest support for mental health provision per capita of any state across Australia. I hope that this mental health Commission will look at those problems and see from our government a commitment to increase funding in these areas so that we can make sure that everyone in our community is cared for and that we are a community that's inclusive and welcoming and able to support those who might not who might fall out of the system, so or fall out of our community more broadly as a result of issues that they're facing in those lives. So I really support the additional comments and the proposal from officers, and I thank them for bringing this to us tonight.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Look, I just have to say I think it's a really well-argued piece of work. Move to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Councillors, there being no other items of urgent business and there being no other matters, I declare the meeting closed, I believe.